I met my wife, Emily, during our college years. We were young, ambitious, and deeply in love. Back then, money didn't matter. We built our life from the ground up, celebrating small victories like getting our first apartment, saving up for vacations, and dreaming about the future. I worked hard, determined to provide for us, and she always reassured me that love was more important than wealth. For years, I believed we were happy. We had our routines, weekend dinners, late-night talks, and plans for a family. I wasn't the wealthiest man, but I provided stability, and I thought that was enough. She never complained, at least not openly. But something changed. It was subtle at first. Emily became restless, spending hours scrolling through social media, admiring influencers flaunting luxury lifestyles. She'd casually mention things like, "Did you see that couple's trip to Bali? Imagine living like that." I brushed it off, thinking she was just dreaming, like we all do. Then came the small but noticeable shifts. She started dressing differently, wearing expensive clothes she never used to care about. At first, I complimented her, happy to see her confident. But then, she started making offhand remarks about my appearance, suggesting I dress better, act more ambitious. She started going out more, claiming it was girls' night or a work event. I trusted her, so I never questioned it. But something about her demeanor felt different. The warmth in her voice when she spoke to me was fading. The way she looked at me changed, as if she was evaluating me rather than loving me. Then came him, a wealthy businessman named Ryan, who suddenly appeared in our social circle. He was everything Emily had been obsessing over, dressed in tailored suits, drove an expensive car, and always had a story about some extravagant trip or investment. I noticed the way she looked at him, eyes filled with admiration, a look she hadn't given me in a long time. I told myself I was overthinking, that Emily was just being friendly. But doubt started creeping in. She talked about him often, laughing at his jokes, bringing up his success in casual conversations. One night, as we lay in bed, she sighed and whispered, "Do you ever wish we had more?" The question stung. I had worked tirelessly to give us a good life. We weren't struggling. We had a home, security, and plans for the future. But in that moment, I realized what she truly meant. She didn't want just stability. She wanted luxury, status. I reassured her, telling her that success takes time, that we were on the right path. She nodded but didn't look convinced. That night, for the first time, I felt a distance between us that I couldn't ignore. Days turned into weeks, and her behavior grew more secretive. Late nights, muted phone calls, sudden plans that didn't include me. My gut told me something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to face it. I wanted to believe in the woman I married, in the promises we had made. But love, as I would soon learn, means nothing when loyalty is gone. Emily's excuses became more frequent. She started working late, going on weekend trips with friends she never mentioned before. When I asked, she brushed it off, acting annoyed that I was even questioning her. The intimacy between us had disappeared. She no longer reached for my hand, no longer kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Our conversations were reduced to small talk, nothing deep, nothing real. I was losing her, and I didn't even know to whom. Then one evening, I saw it with my own eyes. She had told me she was out with coworkers. But something didn't sit right. I couldn't ignore the growing suspicion in my gut, so I drove to the restaurant she always mentioned. And there she was, sitting across from Ryan. She was laughing, leaning into him, her hand lightly touching his arm. The way she used to look at me when we were young, she now reserved for another man. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I decided to gather proof. If she was lying, I wanted undeniable evidence. I checked her phone while she slept. Messages flooded the screen, flirty texts, inside jokes, and photos exchanged between them. She called him exciting, successful, a real man. And me? Boring. Predictable. A man stuck in an average life. Reading those words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had given her everything, loyalty, love, years of my life. And she threw it away for a man who flaunted his wealth. The worst part? She didn't even seem to feel guilty. The texts revealed she had planned to leave me, but only when she was sure Ryan would commit to her. She was keeping me as a backup just in case things didn't work out. I put the phone back, laying beside her in the dark, feeling like a stranger in my own home. My mind raced with thoughts, confronting her, walking away, exposing her. But more than anything, I felt numb. The next day, she acted normal, kissed my cheek, said she had errands to run. I watched her walk out the door, knowing exactly where she was going. And in that moment, I made my decision. She had already betrayed me. Now, it was my turn to show her what it meant to lose something real. When Emily came home that night, I was waiting. Calm, collected, ready. She walked in, pretending everything was fine, but I could see the slight hesitation in her eyes when she noticed my expression. I placed her phone on the table. "Unlock it," I said. She hesitated, laughing nervously.
Why?
"Don't you trust me?" I didn't say a word, just waited. The silence was heavy. Slowly, she picked up the phone, unlocked it, and slid it toward me. I didn't need to scroll far. The messages were still there. "Do you love him?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. Then, finally, she whispered, "I don't know." I nodded, standing up. "Then I'll make it easy for you." She panicked, reaching for my arm. "Wait, let's talk." I didn't mean for this to happen. "Didn't mean to?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You planned it. You lied to me, humiliated me, and strung me along while deciding if he was worth leaving me for." Tears formed in her eyes, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of losing control. "Ryan and I," she started, but I cut her off. "Ryan doesn't want you." I grabbed my phone and pulled up a message I had sent earlier that day. A simple, direct question to Ryan. "Are you serious about her?" His response? Man, it was just fun. Her face drained of color. "He's lying." I shook my head.
No.
"He got what he wanted. You're just another story for him." She collapsed onto the couch, shaking. I didn't feel pity. She had destroyed our marriage for a fantasy, and now, reality was crashing down on her. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a bag I had already packed, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Away from you." I filed for divorce the next morning. I didn't wait for her excuses, her justifications, her desperate attempts to salvage what she had already shattered. She tried to call, text, even showed up at my office, begging me to listen. I didn't. She had made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. The divorce was swift. I didn't fight, didn't argue. I wanted nothing from her, just freedom. She, on the other hand, clung to hope, sending messages that went from desperate apologies to angry blame. At first, she tried to justify everything. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. Then she turned defensive. "You were never ambitious enough." I needed more. And finally, she begged. "Please, I made a mistake. We can fix this." I never responded. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she lost. Ryan disappeared from her life just as quickly as he entered. Once it became clear she was no longer married, no longer a mystery to chase, he moved on to someone else. She had sacrificed a stable, loving marriage for a man who never saw her as anything more than temporary entertainment. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding. At first, the pain was unbearable. The betrayal, the humiliation, the wasted years, it all weighed on me. But instead of drowning in it, I used it as fuel. I hit the gym, focused on my work, traveled, reconnected with old friends. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more walking on eggshells, no more trying to meet expectations that were never enough. I rediscovered the version of myself that didn't need to prove his worth to anyone. Months passed, then a year. One day, I ran into Emily. She looked different, not just physically, but in her eyes. The confidence, the entitlement, the superiority, all gone. She was working a job she hated, barely making ends meet. She looked tired, drained, as if life had finally caught up to her. She gave me a weak smile. "You look good." I nodded, polite but distant. She hesitated, then softly said, I miss you. I smiled. I don't. And then I walked away.